This is awesome. What a wonderful evening tonight. You know, it's funny. All of us have worked for Ben. You know, we started a tradition. You know, we all kind of worked for free back in the day, and it's a tradition that continues to this very moment tonight.
A tradition unlike any other.
But it's funny that
hello, friends.
All of Ben's
the
friends.
The soft wind whispers through the pines. It's Saturday at Augusta. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, Ben's been to Nance's house and hit the par 3 shot, for heaven's sake, so we might want to let him talk about it. Oh, we're not to the U.S. Open portion of the program? I'm sorry.
You know, it's funny, Wes. Did you see how many people stood up that worked for Ben? It was like...
Ben's already nervous, Bill. Go ahead.
It was like at the North Carolina Hall of Fame. It was the biggest crowd ever in Raleigh. And you did the same thing, and 3/4 of the room stood up. Yeah. Tonight, and then the next year, the crowd dropped. And so we see, 2/3 of the room tonight are ISPers. They're very concerned that next year, this event, the attendance will be gone. So just so you know, this is the 2020 North Dakota Sportscaster of the Year, Ben Sutton.
Yeah.
I love North Dakota.
Well,
the North Dakota guy's here. I met him. Yeah, man.
Okay. Hey, let me also add that the three of us up here with Ben that's not a mistake, because we're essentially the old heads. Fair Potter, we're the old heads. So we're walking in tonight, and Bill turns to me. Yeah, you have the gray hair. Bill turns to me and he goes, "This is the Bridger Fieldhouse?" I went, "Yes, it's the Bridger Fieldhouse." And you said?
This is the only building on campus that doesn't have Ben's name on it.
And away we go.
I've got a high-maintenance football coach.
Sorry.
Cat wins bowl games, that's all I know.
That's right.
He wins bowl games, gets after.
Yeah, anything he wants.
You know, Ben, we didn't have the opportunity to work, obviously, for a guy that went to Pete Rozelle and said, we can play football on Monday nights. It was a bold move back in that era, and it took vision. And in 1992, you had a similar vision. For those that don't know, for some of the younger people who are here, the landscape has changed. What did you see in 1992 that made you believe you could pull off initially what you did?
I think it was great, because I spent 8.5 years at Wake Forest apprenticing with Gene and really learning the business inside out. And we were the smallest school in what was then the College Football Alliance. Is that what it was called? The CFA? Association, CFA. And which was kind of the precursor to the BCS to what we have today with the College Football Playoff. And what I learned in that time was that college sports really wasn't getting its rightful piece of the pie. And so if you looked at television ratings historically over the last 50 years, there was the NFL, and then there was college football right on their heels. And yet the disparity between what pro teams made around their programs versus what college teams was 20-1. And so Gene and I worked on a plan for a couple of years, really trying to think about how what would be the best way to get at those rights. And one of the things that I think that we did and did well was understand that bundling all of the various commercial rights that existed in an athletic department together was a better way. And that's what the networks had tried to do. It's what NFL Properties had tried to do. And so if you could take your radio product and TV product and publications, and of course this was before, ultimately there was digital, but this was before Al Gore invented the internet. You knew I was going to get one political comment in tonight, so you get all those rights together in one bundle with one rights holder and professionalize it and take it off of campus where the profit motive is really not high, and put it in a private environment, and you could be successful. And so these bozos here in the middle all believed it, and they came along for the ride. And I saw Billy Merrifield here a while ago, and Joe Potter's here, and Kristen Horn, and they were probably the three of the first 4 or 5 people that came to work with us. And it was so fun, because we started with, I think, 3 people, and the day I left we had 1,200. And the day we went in, we had one school, and the day we left, we had 225. And we had 4 different national market leading businesses, but it was led by this media group. And, you know, a huge part of that, and I think we ought to bring up an extra chair. Do you guys think so?
Yep.
Yeah, I think
Absolutely.
we should bring up an extra chair and bring the guy who I think was the greatest live sports radio producer in America, Chris Ferris, up here on the stage with us. We gave him no advance notice. And this is the kind of stuff I would do to him. He would say, I would walk in and I would say, oh, we just won the cow business. He goes, so we're just adding 3 new schools this year, right? And then about 2 weeks later, I walked in and said, but we also got UCLA, Arizona State, Washington, and Washington State. And so I love to spring surprises on my man Ferris. So, by the way, I have to say, before this gets going, what's really cool is to be sitting up here with Wes Durham, Stan Cotten, and Bill Roth, whose first big job in college sports at a big-time football school, football basketball school, was in Huntington, West Virginia, Marshall University, the Thunderclap, the Thunder and Herd, and we also have our man Steve Cotten here tonight, I saw, who's the current play-by-play, but would never leave Huntington, West Virginia to go somewhere else, because I tried to get him to take the Slippery Rock job, but he wouldn't. So it's kind of cool. Marshall thread. So
I followed Wes Durham at Marshall. And anybody knew Lee Moon in this room besides Ben?
Coach Sutton.
Coach Moon.
Thompson. Yes, sir, you do.
And Lee said, Stan, you can have this job if you promise me one thing. You'll stay more than 8 months. 8 months.
It was actually 11 months and 27 days.
But who's counting? So I do want to say something about Chris, and then Roth, grab the microphone. You're supposed to be the moderator, not me. So, I mean, Jiminy, Christmas. It's nice to have you and your buffet buddy here tonight. So Chris Ferris was, we first met because I listened to him on the radio, and he was on air. His name was Max Speed. Max Speed. And he was flying around in a crippled airplane.
This is great.
Doing traffic reports.
This is everything I've ever wanted.
Yeah.
I'm
Doing
up here
traffic
with
reports.
four
And I said-
people that talk for a living. And I'm usually the one that has my finger on the slide
Yeah.
to pot you down, and there's nothing I can do.
So, but I will say, I mean, when you came, we had a 15-station network at Wake Forest, and that was it.
That's right.
And at least when
And
I
Sam
left,
Mooney had a big rack of couplers.
yeah,
That's how we
yeah.
broadcast it.
Yeah,
yeah.
there's no such thing as satellite back then, because Gore hadn't invented that either. And so, but when we left, I think we were up to about 23 or 2,400 radio stations. It was the largest radio network of any variety in the United States of America, news, sports, or otherwise. And this guy was the architect of all that and deserves to be up here on the stage. So,
Thank you.
We and it was a different
and
era.
did you meet his wife? Talk about a guy that outkicked his punt coverage.
100%.
But Ben, well, we're here, and it almost started as a radio company, because back then, in all seriousness, pre-internet, there weren't everyone walking around with cell phones and apps. The radio network was the primary communication link between the athletics department and the fans.
Correct. And it was 50% of our business. And I don't know what it is today. I would guess it's probably more like 20 or 25%, but it isn't because radio's actually gone down. It's because there have been so many other innovations and inventories created around college athletics programs. I mean, you look at these boards out here that are digital. I mean, you used to sell all these fixed panels, but now they have digital. And so, but in the radio business, this was our bread and butter. And it's remarkable to me today, if you go to a college football stadium and you walk around the stadium, you will still see people who have now their iPhone with their headset plugged in, listening to the games. And when, except when Wes is doing the TV or Bill is doing the TV, if Wake is playing, then I turn it down so I can listen to Stan.
And Dave.
And Dave. That's right.
So,
I'm calling BS on that.
yeah. Well, Ben, will you leave after you have to get to the plane after the end of the first quarter. Everyone in this room knows that. You're out. You're out. Yeah.
Ben listens to the radio when he's on the plane going from one game to the next.
Yeah.
Is that about right?
Everyone in
That's
this
about
room,
right.
everyone in this room, you've not heard Chris Ferris's voice till tonight, but you've heard how he's impacted the way you've listened to games, regardless of which school you've listened to or which broadcast you've listened to, because his fingerprint is on hundreds and hundreds of broadcasts. How many years?
20 full-time. 20 full-time.
Probably 25,000 rolls of gaffer's tape.
It's about right.
Yeah, and but it's changed, and ISP and then to IMG, it's all evolved, and you've been there through the whole thing. So from your perspective, how are things different today than when we all started in the radio house?
Yeah, the radio.
I'll start with Ben's comment about max speed. That is a real story, and so I had 4 jobs, which if anyone is, I'm 53, about to be 54, anyone that age or older knows that if you were in radio, you never had one job. You had multiple jobs. And I will give Ben credit. I remember the day that I guess it was 99, and I've been working for Ben since he was at Wake Forest and coming up into the booth as I was the engineer and producer, and Ben would sit next to me and complain about the football game the whole time because I was the only one that didn't have a microphone, so he could just keep talking in my ear and saying, man, we've got to do this and we've got to do that. And I'm like, you're right, Ben. And we were up in the old press box. But so that was a long time ago. But that was different, and it's interesting what I notice most is having people come to our studios that are, Ben not saying no. Ben saying, you do what you want to do to make this work. I trust you. And I have to tell you, it's the greatest thing that could have ever happened for sports radio that I worked with, because there was never a time when Ben said, we're not going to do that. He would say, I trust you, and let's do it. I also, there's so many people in this room that have worked through our studios, and some folks that have gone on to do things that they dreamed about doing because they had an opportunity in our studios that really stopped existing when radio stations would just voice track everything. And there was no place for Chris Ferris to go in and work midnight to 6 and be a board op and run and get a chance to go on the air at WSJS or WTQR. Didn't exist. And so this was really a great opportunity, and Ben made a lot of that possible. We had great people that came through, though. It was an opportunity. So.
And every technical issue Chris handled with aplomb and calmness. And so that when Wake Forest and Virginia Tech shared the same phone number for a call-in show, and Wake Forest, say for example, played on Monday night, and the next night was Seth Greenberg's talk show, but it was the same number, and Father John called in to talk to the coach and started talking to Seth when he thought he was talking to Coach Odom, and then got Seth mad, which
never happens.
And then someone hit the dump button, which is we cut off a priest. And Seth, you can't cut off a priest. I said, yeah, but he thought he was talking to Dave. We can't talk. And Chris handled it, and the next week we had our own number.
That's right. And
Successful job right there.
I remember calling Chris one night and saying, remind me what the 7 words are that you can't say on live broadcast, because I think Coach Mack just said 3 of them on the Syracuse broadcast.
So which one
and
of you...
then he said them again in the second half.
Which one of you guys decided we had to broadcast every ACC tournament game?
That would be me. This is more of a regional story than a national story. I'll apologize on the front end. When the ACC tournament started in the 1950s, the vision of Everett Case, who came from Indiana to create the ACC tournament at Reynolds Coliseum, They had the Tobacco Radio Network, and a cigarette-smoking, coffee-drinking legend named Ray Reeve did every ball game in the ACC basketball tournament on the Tobacco Radio Network. And there's some guys from the Big Ten, Don Fisher, Matt LePay are here. They'll remember the days when, schools in the Big Ten didn't have one network. They had 7 stations doing the games. Kentucky used to have Kaywood Ledford and Claude Sullivan doing games at UK. So the ACC slowly developed where every school did every game of the ACC tournament. Well, by the way, there's a story about the 5 of us sitting at Noble's Grill over on Stratford Road the night the ACC went from 9 to 12.
Look at them. Guess who got the tab? They all had alligator arms. That was an expensive dinner. But go ahead.
Well, once again, Ben, we appreciate dinner. Just as all these fine people do tonight as well. The idea of the ACC tournament became one of the reasons I went to Georgia Tech in 1995 was that I wanted to do games in the ACC, and I wanted to do every damn game of the ACC basketball tournament. Well, that was fine for the first 10 years until we added 12 freaking schools. And then, because you must know that Bill Roth and Stan Cotten and I have known each other, if you were here last year, Stan Cotten and I have known each other 35 years this September. My first broadcast as a freshman at Mighty Elon was Carson Newman. The Fighting Eagles came to Williams Memorial Stadium in Burlington, the Burlington Metroplex, and we met each other that day, and we've been friends 35 years. Bill Roth and I met 4 years later in 1988 when I went to work for the mighty Radford Highlanders, and he was the first-year voice of the Virginia Tech Hokies. We were in the same fantasy basketball league, which at the time we had no idea was an NCAA rules violation. They could have shut down the institutions. So, in short, all that to tell you that we decided in 2005 at the Verizon Center in D.C., or whatever it's called today, that we were going to do every game of the ACC tournament, but we were going to mix and match. And then in the semifinals, everybody would go back to their respective schools. So Chris crafted the greatest technological breakthrough in the history was if Virginia Tech was playing, the Virginia Tech network would have Bill and Mike doing the game. If Wake Forest was playing, it was Stan and Dinger. If Georgia Tech was playing, it was Wes and Randy. But the other networks, and by that time we had how many? 5 or 6, 7 maybe? Okay? So we mixed and matched. So I actually did a tournament game with Mike Burnham. I got to do a tournament game with Dinger. Stan worked with Randy. We switched and swapped for the first 3 days of the tournament because there were so many damn games. And we didn't want to be plumb tuckered out. And it was awesome. I ended up doing an ACC quarterfinal game with G. David Odom and Wimp Sanderson.
You needed an interpreter. That's coming from me. Can you imagine?
Marty, radio freaking magic. You know why? Because Wimp and Dave argued. The ball's going down the floor. It's 3-on-2. It's a 1-point game, and they're arguing. Well, I don't know, Dave. That damn guy right there's got to guard that guy. Well, the thing you got to understand, Wimp. Chris looked at me. I go, it's a hell of a show we got going right here.
I just want to add one thing to that. I always enjoyed that when we were doing all of the games and you guys had to do every one of the games and there was lemon and juice and water and all these different reasons why we can do this. And then I got to sit next to Stan and produce and engineer and host with Stan. And there were times when they were going through, it was an early game on the 4-game Thursday. No, it would be, Stan, I've got to get a halftime highlight out of you. And I tell him that in the break because he's just talking about Clemson and Virginia and they're just going through the motions. And I said, Stan, I need a highlight. I need a highlight for halftime. Gotcha. The next layup sounded like they just won the national championship. And I was like, thank you, buddy. I appreciate it. Now we got something at halftime.
I remember the first time that I got here in '96 from Marshall. And it was about, I don't know, the second week or so of February. And ISP was over with Krispy Kreme right off of Knollwood Street. You can, and Krispy Kreme, I think, is still there. And this was, I don't know, February, middle of the ACC season. I bumped into Ben in the hallway. I had this little bitty office, and I thought I was at ABC. This was the coolest thing ever. And Ben said, oh, by the way, you know, the ACC tournament here in 2-3 weeks, you need to be prepared to do every game. And I said, yeah, every weight game. I know. I'm the voice of the Deeks. No, every game. What do you mean every game? Are we doing every game? And my fear was that, well, what happens when Wake Forest gets to the ACC championship game on Sunday and I can't talk? Ben wanted to do the games. That's what the deal was. Ben has always said from day one, all I ever really wanted to do was do the games on the radio. And so Ben and his, you know, he's
Wasn't enough to be the damn yell leader here, was it?
You know, of course, if you go to Wake Forest, you have great intellect, which Ben did, and he devised a way to kind of be on the air without being on the air. And one more thing about Chris and his engineering expertise, I'll also never forget the day that Ben hired Chris as a full-time employee at ISP. Now, he was working at traffic patrol. You know, he was going up in the airplane doing traffic patrol on the radio.
Allegedly going up in the airplane.
But
Max speed.
But he
in
was
the
also
air.
my engineer, right? He brought all the gear, he plugged it all up, he made us sound as good as possible. Well, Ben decides to hire my guy. You know, which for a play-by-play guy, your engineer is kind of like your security blanket. I'm like, well, who's going to be my engineer?
I give you pop.
You're going to do it. So I was doing football, and it's real funny. And
I remember this now.
I get to the stadium. And like, for instance, we play Georgia Tech. I drive down myself on Friday to Atlanta, set up the gear. The game starts. I'm calling the game. I'm pushing all the buttons. And then when the game's over, I got to pack it all up, go get my car. But it all worked, right? Somehow. But I remember going to traffic patrol the first time. I said, I got to learn how to do this, right, Chris? And he had this huge mixing board and all the cables, and they were all, you know, remember the old Garanimals? Red goes to red, yellow to yellow. And I'm at Georgia Tech, the first game I ever did. And I'm sitting there plugging up this board with red and blue. And that game, if you'll remember, I don't know if you, my stat guy, Clint Gentry, bless his heart,
Must have been really good if bless his heart came right out. Must have been right
Wake
on
Forest
top.
did not fare too well on the flats at Georgia Tech. We were getting beat. And I think Georgia Tech returned a punt for a touchdown, something like that. Before I could get my hand and pull his mic down, Clint, and he would always tell you, I got a great radio voice. He said, and it makes the air, Wake Forest has the worst damn special teams in the United States. And I'm like, and he gets that sentence out of his mouth. Ben calls Chris at the radio house, and we had to deal with that. But anyway,
Another thing, and
Ron Wellman had
progress,
forgotten
radio
that.
progress.
By the way, Ron had forgotten that entire incident until just now.
you know, and just between everyone in this room, probably a lot of people don't know this, but there was a tradition when everyone did the ACC tournament. I know we got a lot of Big 12 people here tonight and Big 10 people, but in the ACC, during the course of a game, particularly when the tournament was dragging, someone would write down a word on a piece of paper.
Doppelganger.
Everyone
Something like that.
had to use that word in the broadcast. And we would pass the note, and everyone would look around, and you know, when Woody would get it, he'd be like, the Tar Heel Sports Network.
Oh, hell no, we're
That's
not
like
using
going-
this word. Move
That's
that
like-
along.
And it was fine until, you
Give
know,
that to Bob. Duke will use it. We're not using it.
and it was always like when NC State would come up with the word.
Now,
it would
you
always
people
be-
didn't think I was going to let that go, did you?
Yeah. Everyone, NC State would always pass like aroused. Like, how are we going to use that on a broadcast? The crowd is, how are we going to get that in? Wes could do it.
Thank you very much. Hey, Atlanta, what do you want to say? Big city.
The funny thing is that you guys do this. Coach Clausen's wife does this at him every week at his show, and she's like, she studied internationally, lived internationally, was a magna cum laude graduate of college. She comes up with these words. He's over there looking them up on Wikipedia, trying to figure out what they are.
But he always gets them in.
And he's a Williams College graduate.
He always gets them in about the last 4 or 5 minutes, and he'll elbow me. He'll watch this. And he sneaks them in, and she's just like, oh.
I do want to share something here on a serious note about Ben and the impact that he has had and ISP has had. In 1990, Stan Cotten and I both interviewed for the Wake Forest job that ultimately went to G.L. Mac McDonald. We interviewed for that job. And at the time, we began a friendship, essentially. Ben had obviously grown up in Ahoskie, and come to school here and knew my dad. And my dad had actually done football here in the 1960s with Piccolo and Makovic and Bill Tate as the coach, and when he was doing ACC basketball for Chesley. And not a lot of people knew that, but Ben knew that. And Dr. Hooks knew that, obviously, and Skeeta. Always got to get Skeeta's name in when we talk about Wake. But the idea of Ben being able to put this company together and sell dreams to guys who wanted to do games, it was unbelievable. And Stan and I mean, Ben's already talked about, I was at Marshall 11 months, 28 days. Bill had been at Marshall, then went to work at Virginia Tech for Dave Brain, and then became ISP after the, what was that, Ray Sports, Metro News, what was the? Yeah, right. And so Bill ended up, and early on, we grew with the company even though we were on satellite campuses doing the job and working with Jeff Salisbury's or Joe Potter's or Bill Merrifield's or whatever the case may be. So as the company grew and people like Carter Blackburn, who's at CBS, Corey Provost, the voice of the Minnesota Twins, even in recent memory, Tony Castricone at UW, Matt Chasnow at Washington State, I'm going to forget. David Shoemate. Where's David Shoemate, the voice of the Blue Devils? Taylor Durham, the best golfing Durham that's ever lived. Worked on, I mean, Taylor knows where every nook and cranny radio station in Mississippi is.
I have a couple
Andy
of questions here.
I mean, it's amazing the impact that the guy down here has had on people's careers. And tonight, part and parcel is because I tell people all the time, in 1990, you turned the light on for me. And I think you did the same for a lot of us. And not just broadcasters, but other people that were affiliated with the company.
Thank you, brother. I want to put an exclamation point on your Mac McDonald story, and I wish he was here to defend himself, but he's not, so that's actually good. I'll never forget this. He sends me, after I've interviewed all these guys, he sends me a fruit basket. I'd never been sent a fruit basket. He said, through the fruits of my labors, I will be dedicated to Wake Forest, Mac McDonald.
And he hired the guy.
And let me tell you what happened. That I had just gotten married, and that morning I'd had the first argument we ever had. I snapped the thing off. I put a new thing on it. Went home and said, "Here, honey, I brought you a fruit basket." All was good until the all sports banquet the next spring at Wake Forest. And Max stands up and tells that story and thinks it's funny. And then Carter Blackburn used to come in. I used to be skinnier than I am now, and Carter Blackburn was skinnier than me. But as I began to grow, because Potter made me work all the time, I would outgrow my clothes, and so Carter said, "Whatever you're giving away, I'll take." And we were paying Carter like $11, not an hour, a day, maybe a week. And now he's he's going to be the next Jim Nance, and so when we had a little going away party for Carter about 4 or 5 years later when he was going to go work for CBS, everybody's telling all these funny stories about Carter and how he's a Costas Award winner and he's this great guy and all this kind of stuff and he's going to be good and he's going to be on CBS now. And I'm like, I'm going to see you on TV and they're all going to say, hey, he used to work at ISP. And I'm going to go, hey, that's my coat.
True or false? I have a couple of questions here. So just between
True or false questions with the
just
four of
between
us.
On the
No,
essence of
you.
time, true or false?
Yeah. So when you left Wake to start ISP, did Dave Odom really tell you you'll be crawling back here looking for a job in 1 year?
No, he said 6 months. He said you'll be back in 6 months. That's a true story. And when I got inducted in the Hall of Fame, they did a little video. They interviewed him. He goes, I've gotten it wrong a few times, but this might be the top of the list. So,
And B, how did you come up with the name International Sports Properties? I mean, Wake Forest, brilliant campus, amazing university, but
Wait, he's from a Husky.
there was no international. There was no international to it.
we were working on some. We were playing. That's right. We were thinking about it. We were thinking big.
Who came up with the name?
Now, see, I buy that because Dr. Hook said it.
I think he might have come up with it. I don't know. I honestly don't know. But we quickly got rid of the international because everywhere I went, everybody asked me, "Now, what is that? What do you do internationally?" And
We went to the Big East Media Day once. I said, I'm with ISP. And they said, yeah, we need the internet installed right over there.
That's too funny. You're that guy.
All right, we got a few minutes left. All of us in this room, our lives have been impacted, but by your vision. So let me ask you this. In 1992, you kind of had a vision of how bundling media rights, and it evolved into stadium seating. It evolved into tickets, in many different things. If it was you again and you were starting a new company, and I'm talking about Teal, but in the collegiate landscape.
How do you know I'm not?
Dude, how many times
I did that just for all the IMG people that still.
I know. The no compete was wiped out. You're
It's
back in
gone.
the game. Yeah. Tell me about how you see this thing going in the next 20 years.
I think, when we literally, schools were making no money. Wake Forest was making nothing. It was kind of a break-even proposition for us in-house. And other schools, big schools like, Kentucky or Alabama might be making a couple of $100,000 a year. Now, those same schools are now making, $3, $4, $5 million to $20 million a year. And so, but the industry, every industry goes through kind of a revolution, transformation period. Who would have thought that General Electric, my friend Larry Culp is in there trying to save the day right now as CEO, another Wake Forest guy, would be going through the travails that they have the last 4 or 5 years, maybe the greatest company in the world. Every industry and every company goes through that time. The model was broken, and we came up with a new model. And quite frankly, the model is broken again. And so there's room out there for somebody to come in and I think kind of rejigger and innovate and think about the business in a wholly different way than it's being thought about today. And the people that buy into that will get ahead, and the people that don't will be behind. My dad was great. I wish he'd been here tonight, but growing up, he preached one concept. There's no such thing as a status quo. You're either getting ahead or getting behind. And when you think about doing everything the same way tomorrow that you did it today, then you're going to be behind.
You're in a room with the finest broadcasters and writers in America, and also your teammates who are here. I'll let you have the final word tonight.
I would just say that this is a great privilege, first of all, for me to share the stage with these four guys who were very emblematic of the kind of people that we had on our team for those 25 years. And the most rewarding part of this experience for me, and I hope for those people that were a part of it, and our partner schools, and for the fans that listened to our broadcast and watched our television product, was that you understood every day that this was a group that came to play and came to win and competed, and no one would outwork them, no one would out-innovate them, and that's why we're all sitting up here today and all these folks are out here tonight. So I'm proud of all of you. And it's really great to be in the presence, because really the finest sportscasters and sports writers in America are in this room with you tonight. And so it's really quite awe-inspiring to be in this place amongst that group.
You are our Rune Arledge. Congratulations, Ben. And we'll turn things back over to our president, Dave Roth.